Sophia, your spiritual astrologer, and welcome back to the podcast where you'll learn how to use astrology in a more empowering and soul-centered way. And I'm back today with another episode for you in my Astrology Basics series. So you're going to learn all about the 12 zodiac signs today and learning about them in a deeper, more spiritual sense, looking at the soul intention behind them, understanding the full spectrum from the strengths, the high road, but also looking at the shadows that might trip you up and seeing it with compassion and seeing it from this perspective of these zodiac signs are not just these kind of, okay, these are personality traits or these are these stereotypical signs, it's actually seeing beyond that to see how the 12 zodiac signs are representing 12 universal archetypal energy patterns that make up our universe. And so when you see these zodiac signs at that deeper level, then you're able to see, okay, your birth chart is not just a map to your personality and your psyche, but it's a map to your soul. So as I go through this, just keeping in mind that understanding the zodiac signs really deeply is so helpful in understanding a more spiritual astrology because it helps you to see that the way that you are, the way that you can be, the way that you can learn to really understand and deeply master yourself and bring conscious awareness to how you can express yourself in the highest possible way, how you can take your birth chart and express it in the high road, as I like to say, take the high road there. The more you're able to be on your own sacred path, the more true to yourself you are, the more you are able to be met with circumstances, opportunities, people who are meant for you, and the more deeply you can be yourself and be of service to the world and be who you were put on this life to be. So, and what your purpose is. So all of that. And I just want to stress that at the start because I think a lot of times these zodiac signs are seen in this very two-dimensional, stereotypical kind of way, and there's so much misconception surrounding them. So I'm really going to try to help you with that and seeing their soul intention behind it, understanding the archetypes and seeing how there's this whole spectrum of energy that you can express with all of the zodiac signs. So if you've ever been told that you're something negative because of your zodiac sign, that is not the whole truth. That's part perhaps of the shadow expression of that zodiac sign, but there's also the strength. So I always like to give the example, I'm a Taurus sun, all right? So the shadow expression for sure is being stubborn. I can be so stubborn sometimes, and I recognize that in myself. And the highest expression, though, is in part to be very, very determined, being very steady, very grounded. And when you're able to shed a light on that and see, okay, there's this whole spectrum of Taurus energy that I can express. How do I want to choose to show up and express that energy? I'm being more self-aware of that. When I tend to be more stubborn, I can check myself more easily and move into the higher expression. Okay, so just to give you an example of that, and as I go through the zodiac signs today with you, I'll really try to share the strengths and the shadows. I'm also going to show you how you can apply these to your sun, moon, rising. So again, as you're listening, listen to all of them because you have all 12 zodiac signs in your birth chart. So it's super important you know all of these, but paying a special attention to your sun, your moon, your rising, Mercury, Venus, Mars, and what is the deeper soul intention. You don't just have that as a personality trait, rather it's something for you to develop and to express in the highest potential so that way you can live out your purpose, because there's a reason you're meant to express yourself in that way. There's a genius behind it that's helping you to get on track, right? So the more you can step into alignment with your chart, the more you can express your full potential and be true to yourself and what you came here to do. All right, so I wanted to share that at the start. There's so much more that I want to get into here than I'll be able to, but if you are interested in spiritual astrology school, it is my intensive 4-month program to deeply know and learn how to read charts for yourself, transits, all of that. So I will put that in the show notes for you. You can check that out if you're ever interested. Would love to have you join for the next semester. And there's a wait list you can sign up for too. So put that in the show notes, as well as if you want to learn more with me or book a private one-to-one reading. Or if you also want to get my free weekly astro mail, you can download that below too. So I'll put all that below if you haven't already checked it out. And I do have a free astrology guide when you sign up to my free weekly astro mail. So if you want to know more about the zodiac signs, for example, then I recommend you check that out. All right, so let's get into it. Let's get into today's episode and help you learn a bit more about the 12 zodiac signs more in depth. And I should say also at the start, if you didn't read the title of this, this is part 1. So I will have this as a 2-parter episode. So I'm going to go through the first half in this episode: Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, and Virgo. And then in the second episode, I'll go through the rest. Okay, so just to keep that in mind too. All right, so starting off strong, let's begin with the first sign of the zodiac, which is Aries. Okay, so we have Aries, which the archetype here is the archetype of the warrior, of the pioneer, the initiator. When it comes to Aries, we're looking at this fire sign that really wants to get things started, wants to be the leader in a way, and really take action on things. So oftentimes with Aries energy, it's about learning what is it that you want to get started, how can you use that sense of independence and self-motivation to really put toward what is meaningful to you. And Aries tend to come off very brave and bold. Oftentimes, too, they just are so action-oriented. They can be really, really inspiring in that sense, or they love new things. So just new activities, new people, new ideas, and they really love to make sure that they are putting themselves out there in new ways and never standing still. There's this sense of urgency if someone has Aries strong in their chart, that sometimes the shadow expression is they can tend to be a bit too impatient, or sometimes be a bit aggressive or pushy in that sense. And it really comes from this Aries need to make sure that they are moving ahead, that they are getting done what they came to this earth plane to do. So there's this deep sense of needing to go out and make things happen. And again, that archetype of the warrior, sometimes this also another shadow is feeling like they can't ask for help, that they have to look out for themselves and watch their own back. So that's a bit about Aries, and really, again, they're learning about their individuality and how to assert themselves and put them out there in the world. So that's a bit about Aries, and I would say as well here that if we're looking at, sun, moon, rising, we have someone with an Aries sun, like Jackie Chan is the example I'll use here. When you have someone with an Aries sun, it's really about putting themselves out there, wanting to do things, being so brave that they overlook things that other people might be afraid of because they're just wanting to do things in a big way. And that's part of their purpose in life, is to express themselves in very new or independent ways. Whereas if your moon is in Aries, you're not going to notice that as obviously necessarily, because it's more of an inner world process, and how those people tend to express their emotions is really unique in that they will feel big emotions, but then they'll be just as quick to dissipate that emotion. So it's big emotions, but also they leave as quickly as they came, right? And also, too, I would add, if you have an Aries rising, part of that is coming off very Aries in a way that people might see you as very brave, as very daring in some sense, but depending upon the rest of your chart, that may or may not always be true. That is something you can learn to develop more confidence, to trying new things, but again, it might not always feel super authentic. There might be more underneath it than meets the eye. And next up we have Taurus. So this is an earth sign, and the archetype here is the builder. And slow and steady could be a motto for Taurus, I always like to say, because they really are about slowing things down long enough to create security, stability, comfort. Those are all very important things to Taurus. And there's this commitment to really seeing things through. So being very determined, reliable, and really wanting to be consistent. So creating some type of a routine, sometimes being a bit too rigid in that or holding on to things for too long. And that's one of the shadows I mentioned at the start as a Taurus sun myself. You know, the stubbornness that can come with Taurus is really something to be mindful of, because you can really get yourself stuck in something and not want to change. So being flexible is something to work on if you have Taurus planets, and to not resist change when you see that it's needed to help you move forward in your evolution. And Taurus also another archetype. It's very connected to the earth, Mother Earth itself. So sometimes that might factor in some way in what you do. For example, David Attenborough, if you know him, he has his sun in Taurus, and he's a natural historian and a broadcaster. You may have heard his voiceover on, planet Earth and all of that. But there is this connection to Earth, sometimes quite literally, but also that person might feel very grounded. They might be grounded in strong values and what they want, or have a very earthy kind of energy about them as well that helps other people feel a little more settled in their presence and calm. And also just enjoying the little pleasures of life too. So let's look at the sun in Taurus. So I mentioned David Attenborough. Also, Queen Elizabeth II had her sun in Taurus. So that consistency, her being the longest reigning monarch in British history for over 70 years, that's, quite a long time. So again, showing you that slow and steady kind of momentum of Taurus. But if you have your sun in Taurus, it really is connected to not only your identity and those parts of yourself that you really need to develop and grow into, of course, but also for your purpose. So there might be some part of what I shared that you need to develop and put to use in bringing what you want to do to life. So maybe there's something you want to do and it takes some time to kind of build up to it. Maybe you need to kind of do it step by step, for example, or there's some element of earth involved, or needing to help others in some way to build things. That can all look like that, or even like this connection to the pleasures of life, whatever that looks like. And then when it comes to your moon being in Taurus, oftentimes I'll notice it's so funny, that can be such a wild card at times, because again, your moon sign is going to represent that inner world, that part of yourself that remains a bit more hidden to others, especially depending upon your chart setup, right? But it does speak to what you need to feel emotionally secure and good and nurtured. And so when your moon is there, you need structure, you need routine, you need to know, kind of plan out your meals, or you need to feel this sense of day to day, knowing what's coming next can be really helpful, or feeling the sense that things are stable in relationships or life, job, whatever that is. And being very consistent in that sense. Oftentimes, when you have your rising sign in Taurus, there's going to be the sense, again, that's your initial, how you come across to someone for the first time, but also it is really important in that path to fulfillment. So there can be, and on the higher end of things, really a need to express yourself in a way that's very grounded, that helps other people, put them at ease in your presence, that might relate to what you do for a living. Like you immediately can kind of put people at ease and feel more grounded and kind of take a breath, right? So you can apply that to your case. But that is really a gift that comes across with that. And often these people feel very, very grounded, again, but also very consistent, or someone you can count on in some way. All right, so next up we have Gemini, and the archetype here is the messenger. think of the shapeshifter or the teacher. Gemini energy is very, very mutable. So we have here an air sign, and with Gemini, it's a lot about, think of Marilyn Monroe. She had her sun in Gemini, and sometimes it can be this sense that you feel like you have to be all things to all people if you have a lot of Gemini in your chart, because Gemini is very friendly, very adaptable, curious. I love to say that with Gemini, it's the sign of a million questions because oftentimes there's this huge curiosity that drives what you do and asks you to seek things that are novel or unique or a bit unexpected in a sense. So there's such a need to really, with Gemini energy, collect all of this information that might seem disparate and bring it together to connect the dots in a way and bridge information. So oftentimes the shadow of this is sometimes feeling like there's this sense of inconsistency because they're all over the place or scattering themselves spreading themselves too thin in a way, or there's the sense with Gemini that because they can really shapeshift, they can be who that person needs them to be rather than being true to themselves. So needing a bit more groundedness with Gemini energy is important. And oftentimes too with Gemini, it's very connected to communication. So if you have this in your chart, that's a huge focus for you. Needing variety, but also making sure you're not being too restless, right? So that's important. And the last thing I'll mention here is really being playful, being quick on their feet, like very flexible-minded, and always looking for a bit of fun is something with Gemini. It's, again, very playful energy and not taking themselves too seriously, I would add. So that's a look at Gemini energy. And I would say, again, if your sun is in Gemini, that's going to be a huge part of your purpose of self-actualizing, is allowing yourself to package the highest expression of those Gemini traits and putting them out there into the world. So that might look like you are bridging together a lot of new ideas or people. Maybe your work has something to do with communication in a way. Oftentimes, if you have your moon sign here, there's a huge need in terms of relationships, of how you feel nurtured, to feel really heard and seen, to express yourself and not keep that bottled up. And if you have your rising sign in Gemini, that's going to be someone who is very connected to spoken word, to writing, to using their voice in a way to share information with others. Being that teacher archetype might connect them to their purpose as well. And for example, I have a Gemini rising, and so I love to share with other people, and I love to connect with the new people, and that's something that I make use of on this podcast, for example. It's very, very fulfilling for me. Okay, so next up we have, and there's so much more I want to say about all of these, so again, just giving you a look at them. But next up we have Cancer. So the archetype here is the archetype of the mother and the nurturer, the protector. When we're talking about this Cancer energy, it's think of a bear, right? Like a mama bear. It's not only being nurturing, it's also being fiercely protective. And so oftentimes with these people, you'll feel this sense with them, if they have Cancer energy, of just being so relatable, so wanting to nurture you in some way. And there's this sense that they really are very hospitable people. They want people to feel a sense of belonging, of family almost in a way. And so this is a water sign here, and we do have that connection also to emotions. And the example I always think of with Cancer energy, someone who exemplifies it so well, is Princess Diana. So if you think about just how relatable she was to others, the warmth that she radiated, and just how approachable she was, she really represented being the people's princess, right? And being able to feel like you knew her, even if you didn't. That's such a gift if someone has a lot of Cancer energy that they radiate out into the world. And other traits here being nurturing, protective, loyal is another one. Again, this is the highest expression here I'm talking about. So also there's this sense of wanting to create safety for others, wanting to organize people, really good management skills sometimes when they have Cancer energy, that emotional intelligence of knowing who will get along with who's most equipped for this task, and caring for family, for home. Those are whoever are your people, your tribe of people, you're going to really feel so close to and responsible for almost. A shadow of Cancer energy is oftentimes they'll fear rejection. So that's the crab in its shell, which Cancer, that's the symbol for it, where they might kind of tend to close off to others. And they are very emotional, very empathetic beings in that way, but they can kind of tend to be moody sometimes or closed off, defensive if they don't feel like they're able to really express themselves how they want to, or if they fear that that won't be reciprocated or something of that nature. So for Cancer, really when you have the sun there, that's going to be a big part of your purpose. Again, that's going to be something with Cancer where it's a lot of your life forces you've been put into that. So you might really care a lot about whoever your family is, your soul family, or wanting to make people feel the sense of acceptance. That's a part of your purpose, right? Whereas if someone has their rising sign there, I noticed that they come across as that really, really easily. So that's part of their purpose, is to help people immediately feel often this sense of familiarity with that person right off the bat. And you could see how that'd be helpful if someone's in the health field, for example, or they're doing something really novel and they want people to relate to them. So it brings a sense of trust, I notice, with Cancer risings immediately, very often. And the moon sign, if you have your Cancer moon, that is the moon in its home sign of Cancer. So very comfortable there. And oftentimes there's this really deep instinctive intuition. So they might just kind of like know things at this bodily kind of level, like they sense it in their bones. So an intuition like that. And there's a big, big need for needing to express emotions in relationships. That's really, they develop such strong bonds with others as well. So it's a really beautiful thing to see. And then next up, we have another fire sign, the sign of Leo. And the archetype here is the king. It has that royal quality to it, but also the performer, the entertainer. And again, these archetypes are really distinct facets of Leo energy in this case, right? So we're seeing how this zodiac energies can manifest in distinct ways, but underlying it, we have that energy that's coming through. And so with Leo, what I notice in readings, and actually putting this into practice, I noticed that if you have planets in Leo, personal planets especially, you're going to feel this sense that you have to express who you are out into the world. There's really this need to be yourself, be authentic to yourself, find what's unique to yourself. Creative expression is so important. And that can look really, really bold if you think of Madonna with her sun in Leo, but it can also look more subtle. Just this feeling that something's bubbling up inside of you that you need to express. You need to get out there to paint on the canvas of life. So with Leo, that underlying soul intention is really to put yourself out there. Sometimes that can be scary, and that's kind of the shadow side of it, is this sense of self-consciousness that can kind of feel a bit wobbly or shaky, or even bring a lack of confidence before you really feel comfortable expressing yourself out into the world. But there's also this sense with Leo energy of this warmth you want to bring to others. You want others to feel joyful, you want to entertain, and you want to encourage others perhaps in a more subtle sense. So there's really with Leo this need to be appreciated. And the higher side of this is also to help other people feel appreciated, bringing them into the spotlight. If you think of Leo being ruled by the sun, it also helps you to see how that can manifest as bringing, others into that spotlight. And and then also for Leo, I want to add there's this generosity to them too that I really love. And the shadow side I mentioned, but also if someone really is over-identified with what they're creating or how they express themselves and ego, then that can bring in a bit of pridefulness. So also being mindful of that. And so if you have your sun in Leo, you'll notice that what I just shared, you might want to embody some of these qualities on the path to your purpose. Like that factors big in who you are, how you identify with yourself, and creative expression is a really big part of that. If your moon is in Leo, sometimes that will be a bit more about how you experience your emotions. So you might notice that you have really big emotions. Your inner world is a bit more dramatic than other people might know, but also you might really love to laugh things off, to use humor in some sense to get by during like heavier times. And if you have your rising sign in Leo, often I'll notice those people they have such a warmth about them, and they can feel there's almost like this regal quality, like they really carry themselves well, but often there might be more going on underneath. They might kind of not feel as sure of themselves as they lead off as seeming. So that's something that they might be learning to really understand who they are and find more confidence in that. And then next up, we have Virgo. So this is another earth sign. And with Virgo, the archetypes here are the mentor, the craftsman, someone who really cares about their craft, what they do, the details of things, wanting to improve. And there's this humility about them too, this really big desire to do the best they can do. And they're doing it for the love of what they do. And also to lend a helping hand to others, to be of service. Usually with Virgo, it's such a desire a commitment to their craft, to work harder, to improve just for that. And also with Virgo, sometimes they can be very analytical, very organized, or very thoughtful. So remembering those little details others might forget, and being such a support for other people when needed. And also I would say with Virgo, though, a big thing to keep in mind is although they want to always solve problems and they're very good at that, also keeping in mind that they can kind of take a day off is really important, and to not be overly critical of themselves or perfectionistic to where it gets in their way. So there is a balance that needs to take place there. But the sole intention is really to improve, to allow themselves to do something and perfect those skills to help others. So an example of this, if you think of Kobe Bryant, had his sun in Virgo, and just that diligence, that discipline, and to always want to be better and better and be someone people looked up to in that way. And so really important with Virgo to find something that you can improve on and kind of narrow your focus in on that. And I would say also if you have your sun in Virgo, as I mentioned, that's going to be important for your developing your purpose, your sense of self. You're very focused on that. But also if you have your moon in Virgo, sometimes people can't always see that. And that can be, you might worry a lot, or you might tend to, when it comes to relationships, you might need to make sure that you find someone who also is willing to grow with you. To communicate is so important in your relationships. And then if you have your rising sign in Virgo, sometimes this is wanting to come off in a way that is more controlled and other people don't always see in. So there's kind of this sense of, with Virgo risings, of being very thoughtful and coming across as being very helpful to others, but also a bit guarded or reserved. That comes up there. All right, so that's it for Virgo, and that's actually it for the first half of the zodiac. So we went from Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, and Virgo. Hopefully you learned something new. I would love to hear what you got out of this episode in part 2. The next one I'll do will be for the rest of the zodiac signs, so Libra, Scorpio, and Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces. All right, again, that will be in part 2. But after this episode, you want to go back and listen to more about your sun, moon, and rising. I do have those 3 different episodes diving deep into all that means, and you can combine what you learned here with those episodes. That would be so awesome if you wanted to really apply what you learned and go back to listen if you have one of your sun, moon, rising in one of these signs. Okay? All right, so that is all I have for you in today's episode. If it was helpful, it's so helpful for me if you want to give it a 5-star review, and thank you so much if you've already done so. And make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on part 2. And just as a reminder, again, if you do want to ever book a reading with me or learn more astrology with me or get that free astrology guide or sign up for the next round of Spiritual Astrology School, all of that is linked in the show notes for you. And yeah, if you ever want to just say hi on Instagram, I'd love to hear from you. So, all right, that's it for today's episode. Thanks so much for learning astrology with me, and until next time.